When she stepped into the courtroom, moving as if the building itself owed her an apology, no one yet knew that her real reason for being here had nothing to do with the ticket in her hand. It had been an ordinary morning up to that moment. A few seniors debating whether the meter signs downtown were too small. A young father whispering to his daughter to sit still. Someone in the back clearing their throat every 30 seconds. The kind of habitual noise people tolerate in a public room. Routine cases moved along in a steady rhythm, like the slow shuffle of winter boots across the floor. Then the door swung open with a bang that wasn't loud, but felt loud. She entered with the brisk, efficient stride of someone accustomed to having doors opened for her. The wife of a man who owned half the gas stations on the west side of Providence. Her posture said she was here under protest. Her eyes, cool, scanning, dismissive, took a single sweep across the room, as if evaluating the worth of every person inside. Her heels punctured the quiet with a sharp, echoing cadence. Click, click, click. Each step cut through the murmurs until even the throat-clearing man fell silent. A few older spectators exchanged quick glances. They'd seen that kind of walk before, and it never meant anything good. Judge Caprio lifted his eyes from the docket. Just a slight narrowing, subtle but unmistakable. He had sensed something was off before she even spoke. She didn't wait to be addressed. She slid her paperwork across the bench with a movement so deliberate it was practically a statement. Not rude, but nowhere near respectful. When the judge asked for her license, she hesitated a beat too long before passing it over, as if she were doing him a favor. He read the form, paused, and looked back at her. "This is a parking violation," he said. "A minor one." Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into the edge of something sharper. "Yes, well," she murmured, "my husband already spoke with your office." There it was, the first crack in the facade of a simple case. A ripple of discomfort moved through the benches. People leaned forward. Someone whispered, "Oh boy," the kind of low, breathy comment that slips out when tension rises. Caprio rested the paper back on the desk. "Your husband spoke with my office?" She shrugged one shoulder, eyes drifting toward the ceiling as though reconsidering the value of answering at all. "He wanted to make sure this didn't take too much of my time." That earned a few quiet scoffs from the gallery. She didn't seem to hear them, or refuse to. But the judge heard everything. And he noticed one more detail. The license plate on the ticket didn't match her registration. The car wasn't hers. He leaned back slightly, hands folded, voice even. "All right," he said. "Let's start with something simple." A brief pause, controlled, almost theatrical in its restraint. "Why are you here today?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Her jaw tightened. Somewhere behind her, a man shifted uncomfortably, as if bracing for an answer none of them were prepared for. And for the first time since she entered, her confidence flickered. Only for a second, just long enough for everyone to feel it. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she shifted her weight, straightened her shoulders, and tried to recover the poise she'd walked in with. The room watched her recalibrate, like someone adjusting a mask that had slipped a little too far. Her name was Melissa Grant. In Providence, that name tended to open more doors than it closed. Before she married into the Grant family, she had worked long shifts at a corner store, where customers argued over pennies, and where she once got written up for taking too many minutes on her unpaid break. Now she helped oversee a small but profitable chain of gas stations, properties that hummed with steady traffic, and brought in just enough cash to turn her into someone people noticed. And she liked being noticed. Judge Caprio looked down at the file again, then back at her. "The vehicle on the citation, does it belong to you?" "Yes," she replied too quickly. The words snapped out like she had practiced it on the drive here. He didn't react, but the speed of her answer created a subtle tightening in the room. A few spectators leaned in, instinctively sensing her discomfort. Her left hand, the one holding her phone, trembled just enough that the screen shook. "You seem uneasy," the judge said gently. "I'm not," she answered, sharper than necessary. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted toward the courtroom door as if she expected someone, her husband, a lawyer, anybody, to stride in and rescue her from having to explain anything. She glanced down at her phone again. No new messages. Her jaw clenched. Caprio noticed the way she kept returning to that device, as though it were a lifeline. "If your husband couldn't be here, that's fine," he said mildly. She lifted her chin. "He has more important matters today." It wasn't the words that caught the room's attention, but the tone, one part defiance, one part wounded pride. A few older men in the gallery exchanged knowing looks. They'd seen this kind of dynamic before. The judge moved the file to the side. "Let me ask something else. Were you at the station the day this citation was issued?" She hesitated. It was brief, but unmistakable. "I stop by often," she said. "I oversee operations when necessary." A vague answer. Too vague. He nodded slowly. "It also says you signed a statement that day on behalf of the vehicle's registered owner. That would be your husband." Her breathing tightened. Just slightly, but the kind of small shift people notice when they're already watching closely. "I sign things for him constantly," she said. "That's not unusual." "But you signed it the same afternoon," Caprio said softly. "That something else seems to have happened at the station." Her eyes flashed with irritation, defensive, not angry. "Nothing happened." Someone in the back coughed in disbelief. She shot a quick glare in that direction. The judge remained calm. He'd handled enough people to recognize when someone was trying to outrun their own conscience. "You're certain?" he asked. "Yes," she snapped. But her posture told a different story. Her fingers dug into the side of her purse. The foot she kept perfectly still a moment ago began tapping lightly, betraying the panic she was trying to smother. He dropped his voice a notch. "Mrs. Grant, this doesn't feel like a $50 problem. It feels like there's more sitting on your shoulders today." Her breath caught, barely, but visibly. "I'm fine," she insisted, but the words cracked around the edges. For a moment, the room was silent except for the distant hum of the building's heating vents. Older spectators watched her with a mix of disapproval and something else, something almost sympathetic. They knew the look of someone who had built a life they were terrified of losing. Then, as if sensing that her silence was drawing too much attention, she straightened again and forced her voice steady. "Can we just resolve the ticket?" But no one, not the judge, not the gallery, and certainly not Melissa herself, believed that the ticket was why she came. Judge Caprio opened the file once more, scanning the paperwork with a patience that only heightened the tension. When he spoke, his tone carried none of the weight she was expecting, just measured curiosity. "The citation was issued outside your own station," he said, "in the loading zone." A wave of murmurs rolled through the benches. Parking in a loading area wasn't unusual, but doing it at your own business during the busiest hour of the day hinted at something else entirely. Melissa's smile froze. "It was a mistake," she said. "I was in a hurry." Caprio tapped the form lightly. "The report notes your vehicle was there for 52 minutes. A few seniors in the gallery shook their heads. Everyone in Providence knew how chaotic those stations got at lunchtime. 52 minutes wasn't a mistake. It was a blockade. He continued, "There's also footage from the station cameras included with the ticket. It shows you stepping out of the vehicle several times, talking to someone off-screen." A pulse of panic flickered in her eyes. Not enough for her to lose composure, but enough to betray recognition. "And the vehicle isn't registered in your name," the judge added. "It belongs to your husband. Yet you filed the statement on his behalf the same afternoon." She opened her mouth, searching for a polished answer. None came. He folded his hands. "So, I'll ask something very direct. Why were you at the station at the exact time an incident occurred involving one of your employees?" The air in the courtroom tightened. A few people leaned back, as if bracing for impact. "I'm not here to discuss our staffing issues," she said. The words came out clipped, brittle. A low rustle traveled through the room. The moment felt too sharp to ignore. Then, from the third row, a quiet voice broke the silence. "Your Honor, I was at that station that day." All heads turned. An elderly man, dressed in a slightly faded work jacket, rose slowly. He wasn't confrontational. If anything, he looked reluctant, like someone speaking only because conscience pushed harder than comfort. "I don't want trouble," he began, "but I recognized her. I remember thinking the young fellow working there looked shaken. She was—" He hesitated, eyes flicking toward Melissa. "She was giving him a hard time. Real hard." A hush fell over the room. Even the judge took a moment before speaking. "Mrs. Grant?" he asked quietly. Her composure shattered for a heartbeat. He wasn't doing his job," she stammered. But the elderly man shook his head. "The boy was stocking shelves. She cornered him near the back door. I heard her say he'd regret crossing the wrong family." Several spectators gasped. Others exchanged knowing, uneasy glances. The tension thickened into something heavy, almost suffocating. Melissa's face drained of color. She looked not angry now, but cornered. Caprio kept his voice level. "Are you sure you want to continue saying this is only about a parking violation?" Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Not until frustration cracked through her restraint. "You don't understand," she burst. "That boy, if he talks, he could ruin everything my husband built." The room froze. It was the kind of outburst no one expected from someone who walked in acting untouchable. Caprio sat back slowly, his expression turning solemn. "Mrs. Grant," he said, "what exactly are you afraid he'll say?" Her eyes darted to the door, toward escape, or toward someone who might save her from the truth. And at that exact moment, as if summoned by her worst fear, the courtroom door opened. A young man stepped inside, thin, tired, unsure of himself, but unmistakably the employee she had confronted. He stopped just past the threshold, looking at her with a mixture of fear and resolve. No one moved. No one breathed. The real story had just walked into the room. The young man paused just inside the doorway, as though unsure whether he was allowed to proceed. His jacket sleeves were too long, his shoes worn down at the heel. Nothing about him suggested confidence, yet the room shifted the moment he appeared, as if everyone sensed he carried the missing piece of the puzzle. Judge Caprio gave him a small nod. "Come in, son. Take your time." Melissa stiffened. A flush rose along her neck, the kind that comes not from anger, but from being caught off guard. She tried to steady her breathing, but her chest moved in shallow, uneven rises. Every eye in the room was fixed on her now, not on him. The judge spoke gently. "Mrs. Grant, is this the employee you mentioned?" She didn't answer. Her gaze locked on the young man, who avoided her eyes entirely. Caprio turned to him. Were you working at the station the day this citation was issued? Yes, sir, he said softly. And was there an interaction between you and Mrs. Grant? Melissa's voice broke in, sharp and urgent. That has nothing to do with this ticket. But the judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The simple act of waiting in silence made her argument collapse on its own. He looked back at the young man. Go on. The boy swallowed hard. I was supposed to handle a delivery that morning, but the truck couldn't get through because her SUV was blocking the loading area. A ripple of understanding swept through the benches. Older spectators shook their heads. They knew exactly how critical punctual deliveries were for small operations. Melissa spoke quickly. He's exaggerating. But the judge lifted a hand, stopping her. The young man continued, voice trembling but determined. She told me if the order was late again, she'd make sure I wasn't hired anywhere in the city. I tried to explain the cooler was malfunctioning and I needed to report it. It's a safety thing, but she didn't want to hear it. A heavy silence settled. There was no drama in his telling, just plain facts. That simplicity made it harder to dismiss. Caprio leaned forward slightly. Is that true, Mrs. Grant? Her composure broke. A flicker, fear, indignation, something tangled between the two. He was threatening the business, she said. You don't understand what kind of damage that can cause. And blocking the loading area. Was that intentional? Caprio asked. Her silence gave the answer before her mouth did. It wasn't. She stopped halfway through. The sentence wouldn't form. She looked trapped between pride and truth. Caprio's voice softened, but his eyes stayed sharp. Why were you afraid of him speaking up? She opened her mouth, then pressed her lips together, as if the truth were pushing forward faster than she could contain it. When she finally spoke, the words were unsteady. You don't know what goes on at those stations. If people start digging, it could bring inspectors, and then reporters, and then… She froze. She'd said too much. A murmur rippled through the room. The judge's expression cooled, not with anger, but with the weight of someone who'd just recognized something larger beneath the surface. Mrs. Grant, he said quietly, what is it you're afraid will be found? Her eyes darted toward the exit again, as though calculating how long it would take to reach the door. But before she could speak, a uniformed officer stepped inside behind the young man, holding a clipboard. Judge, the officer said, we received your request. The employee is here to give his statement. Melissa's shoulders dropped, not in surrender, but in shock. You called him? She whispered. No, Caprio replied. He was already on the list to appear. Someone filed a report about the incident. Her face drained. She understood what that meant. Someone inside the system had taken the boy seriously. In that charged stillness, the truth hovered like a storm cloud waiting to break, and the entire room could feel it. The young man stepped forward, clutching the edges of the clipboard as if steadying himself against the weight of what he was about to say. Judge Caprio waited, hands folded, posture open, not pushing him, simply giving him the space he needed. Tell us what happened, the judge said quietly. The boy took a breath. I didn't want to file anything, sir. I only did because I didn't feel safe. A murmur drifted across the gallery, soft but unmistakably sympathetic. He continued, voice low but clear. Her husband told me to keep quiet. Said people who talk too much don't last long in this town. He paused, looking down at his shoes. I know he didn't mean it like a threat, but it felt like one. Melissa flinched at that, the first honest crack in her armor. The boy went on. The cooler was leaking something. Smelled like chemicals. I told her we needed to shut it down until someone checked it. She said I was making excuses and holding up the rush. He swallowed. When I tried to show her the problem, she blocked the doorway with her SUV and told me to learn my place. Some people in the back exchanged uneasy glances. Others stared at her with open disapproval. The silence in the room was heavy, dense enough to feel in the air. She said, he continued, that if I talked to anyone outside the station, she'd make sure I regretted it. I don't think she meant it literally, but... He hesitated, searching for the right words. It scared me. Nothing in his tone was accusatory. No theatrics. Just the quiet honesty of someone who'd carried fear longer than he should have. Judge Caprio exhaled slowly. "Thank you," he said. "Your honesty matters." He turned to Melissa. "Mrs. Grant?" She didn't speak. Her lips parted slightly, as though she meant to offer another sharp retort, but the fight was gone from her eyes. What remained was something raw, shame mixed with exhaustion. The judge didn't press. Instead, he spoke in the calm, steady cadence that had disarmed far more hardened people than her. "You had authority," he said, "and authority can steady a place, or crush the people in it. That young man depended on you to keep him safe, not to silence him." Her gaze dropped, the first fully unguarded gesture she'd shown all morning. She tried to compose herself, but her voice quivered. "You don't understand. This wasn't about him. It was about keeping our name clean." She paused, blinking rapidly. "My husband is already under review for other issues. A complaint from an employee would make things worse." Her confession wasn't dramatic. It was painfully human, the truth tumbling out because she had run out of corners to hide in. "I shouldn't have spoken to him the way I did," she whispered. "I just panicked. I didn't want everything we built to fall apart." A breath. "He didn't deserve that. I know that now." The courtroom remained still. For the first time, her voice carried no arrogance, no rehearsed control, only vulnerability. Judge Caprio let the silence settle before responding. "Fear doesn't excuse harm, Mrs. Grant, but acknowledging it is a start." She nodded, unable to look up. He shifted the paperwork aside. "As for the citation, the parking violation stands. You obstructed a loading zone for nearly an hour." His tone softened. "Additionally, I'll be notifying the proper departments to ensure this young man is treated fairly moving forward." Her eyes flickered with resignation. Not defiance, not outrage, just acceptance. Then the boy spoke again, almost apologetically. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted them to take the safety stuff seriously. We work late sometimes. It's scary when something breaks and no one listens." His sincerity hit the courtroom harder than any accusation could. Even Melissa's features softened. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time seemed to see the person behind the inconvenience she had feared. "I'm sorry," she murmured. Not for the judge, not for the room, but directly to him. The boy nodded, surprised, but grateful. And for a moment, the tension lifted, not because the conflict was resolved, but because the truth finally had air to breathe. The tension that had filled the courtroom slowly unraveled, not because the situation turned simple, but because the truth had finally taken its rightful place. Melissa stepped back from the bench, shoulders no longer squared in defiance but lowered, as if she were carrying the weight of her own choices rather than the burden of keeping up appearances. When Judge Caprio concluded the matter, she didn't linger. She gathered her things quietly, almost cautiously, like someone trying not to disturb the air around her. Her heels, which earlier struck the floor like declarations, now touched it softly. On her way toward the exit, her phone vibrated twice. Short, insistent alerts. She looked at the screen, saw her husband's name, and immediately turned the phone face down in her palm. For the first time that morning, it seemed she didn't have the energy to pretend. As she stepped out of the courtroom, the door eased shut behind her, leaving a gentle hush in its wake. Inside, the young employee shifted awkwardly, unsure if he should leave or remain. Judge Caprio gave him a nod. "You're free to go, son. But before you do—" The boy paused. The judge's voice softened into something almost fatherly. "No job should make you afraid. And no employer, no matter how influential, stands above the rules that protect you." The boy absorbed the words with a slow, grateful breath. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. A few people in the gallery began to clap, not loudly and not all at once. A restrained, sincere applause from those who had seen enough of life to appreciate when justice arrived, not with thunder, but with clarity. In that room, those small gestures meant more than any dramatic outburst could. The judge waited for the sound to fade before turning back to the young man. "If there's anything further you need, guidance, support, a contact at the department, you let someone know. Don't carry this alone." The boy nodded again, moved by the assurance. "I just wanted things to be safe," he said. "Sometimes we work nights by ourselves. It can get dangerous. We worry about robberies. That's why I reported the cooler. I thought it was leaking something flammable." The judge's expression tightened with concern. "You were right to speak up. Safety isn't a negotiation." The boy gave a small, relieved smile. Not triumphant, not proud. Simply relieved that someone in authority had treated him with dignity. He stepped toward the exit, shoulders a little straighter than when he entered. The courtroom settled into a thoughtful quiet. People gathered their coats, exchanged murmured comments, shook their heads at the memory of Melissa's earlier bravado, and at the stark contrast of how the morning ended. As the last few attendees made their way out, Judge Caprio stacked the paperwork, pausing only once. His gaze drifted toward the door where the young man had just gone, then to the empty bench where Melissa had stood moments earlier. He spoke softly, almost to himself, but loud enough for the clerk to hear. "Every case looks small until you understand the people inside it." He closed the file. Then, after a brief silence, he added, with the weight of someone who had seen decades of human stories unfold before him, "Sometimes the law fixes the violation. Sometimes the truth fixes the person." A quiet stillness followed, one of those rare moments when even a public room feels sacred, touched by something earnest and unforced. And as the clerk turned off the microphone and the next case prepared to begin, the aftertaste of the morning lingered. Not scandal, not spectacle, but a simple certainty that justice, when guided by patience and clarity, could still change the course of a day. And maybe, for some, the course of a life.